for mainstream Australia.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. We will now move to question time. Senator Wong, I will just address the issue you raised yesterday before we start. Senator Wong, you did raise a point of order and you did ask me to come back to the chamber on it. Yesterday, I undertook to review the Hansard in relation to a point of order raised by the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator Wong, and come back to the Senate. The point of order related to the requirement in Standing Order 72 that answers must be directly relevant to the questions asked. Previous rulings make clear that a minister cannot simply answer the question at the beginning of their response and then talk about matters that are not directly relevant for the remainder of their time. Every part of an answer must be directly relevant to the question. It is my intention to continue applying those rulings, and I have done so. I have also previously observed that a glancing phrase in an answer is not going to make someone not directly relevant, but that an answer that consisted of simply attacking the opposition would not be directly relevant. After points of order on the first supplementary question, I brought the minister back to the question. However, the point of order I undertook to review was taken in respect to Senator Wong's second supplementary question, which asked the minister, in his representative capacity, his opinion on the views of his colleagues. Past rulings have indicated that where a question is politically loaded, a minister is entitled to some wider latitude to address the terms, assertions and imputations in the question. I would view a question asking for an opinion in a representative capacity of the views of others is also allowed a similar latitude. A point of order was also taken on the Leader of the Government not facing the chair when answering questions. As I said at the time, there was no point of order. The requirement in the standing orders is about language, not body language, requiring remarks to be addressed to the chair. I'm perfectly comfortable with all senators looking to the chamber whilst addressing their remarks to me. Senator Wong.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Why did the Morrison-Joyce government this morning refuse to pass a motion in the Senate which noted with concern, and I quote, "increasing reports of threats of violence from an extreme element of society towards health workers, health officials, premiers and other parliamentarians"?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, Mr President, let me deal firstly with the specific facts in relation to the motion, and Senator Wong has carefully worded her question around why did the government refuse to pass, not why did the government oppose, and that is, of course, because the motion itself was never actually put to the chamber. The motion itself was not put to the chamber because the government, as we have consistently done since the temporary orders in relation to motions were put through this chamber, opposed an attempt to vary the order of business at the commencement of proceedings. We have consistently done that each and every time, I believe, there has been a move to do so since the change of those temporary orders. That is simply the government's position in relation to the way in which Senate business is managed. Had the opposition sought by other means to raise those issues, then no doubt the government would have been in a position to consider the motion on its merits, and in terms of the content of the motion, Mr President, can I say that the government does condemn all acts of extremism and violence. The government does condemn acts that seek to incite violence in any way towards any of those engaged in our public debate, towards any of those engaged in public service, towards any of those Australians going about their ordinary lives in a peaceful way. Can I say, Mr President, on such topic, that in this place the content, the tone, the manner in which we all engage is important. Much of the debate this week seems to have centred around issues of extremism, but also issues of personal attacks around this chamber or across the parliamentary body. They do not help to elevate the debate. They do not help us to stay on the issues.
Expired. Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I also say to the minister that the motion that he and his party refused to pass included this: condemned those in public office who have, for their own political gain, sought to diminish the collective achievements of Australians by dividing the nation, stoking anger and fear, inciting violence or lending sympathy to the actions of ideologically motivated extremists. Why did you refuse to pass that? And I invite you to indicate what would be required for you to enable you to support such a motion.
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. And Mr President, I do, as I did in the previous answer, condemn those who engage in violence or who incite violence, whatever walk of life they come from, be they public officials, members of parliament or indeed others who do so. Mr President, in relation to the motion itself, I was very clear in the primary answer that the government was simply operating with the same convention we have for any motions that have come forward at that time. The opposition has taken a different approach, sometimes supporting suspension, sometimes not, sometimes proposing it. That's the opposition's perspective. The government's view was when we took the motions policy reforms in this place, we ought to then also ensure that we are held to a consistent approach in that regard, and we have done so. Of course, motions put through the normal processes the government will consider in terms of when they come up in this chamber.
Minister. Senator Wong, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. Will the minister agree to jointly move and debate this motion next week?
Minister.
Well, Mr President, I'm always happy to engage in discussions with those around the chamber in relation to matters that have progressed in good faith. I'm always happy to ensure that we can, where necessary, come together to make unifying statements on behalf of the parliament and the nation. That's important that we do that. I don't much like a process that engages in stunts. I do think, Mr President, that it is also important that in doing so we work cooperatively in relation to the text of such matters. That has been the case on many occasions in relation to statements that are sought to be pursued in a bipartisan context. And of course I would respond constructively if we wanted to work through that process. I do think, Mr President, that whilst celebrating Australia's enormous achievements in relation to COVID, we do need to acknowledge there have been debates around policy responses to COVID. It's legitimate to debate policy responses, but never to do so in a violent way.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston. How is the Liberal and Nationals government boosting the capacity of frontline domestic violence services?
Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Chandler for that question. This government, the Morrison-Joyce government, is absolutely focused on making sure that we have an Australia that is free of violence. And that's why in the budget this year, the 21-22 budget, we committed the largest amount of money, $1.1 billion package, to ensure women's safety. This is a historic package, is a down payment to make sure that we move towards zero violence in this country. But we know every Australian has a role to play in ending violence, and that's why we have committed a $260 million package to work with the states and territories to make sure that they are able to provide frontline services, making sure that they are providing opportunities for their frontline workers and also developing and increasing capacity in the family and domestic violence sector. In providing this commitment as a partnership to the states and territories, this $260 million partnership over 2 years, that's a lot more than $153 million over 4 years, ensures money goes to where it needs to be on the ground. This commitment builds on the $130 million that we provided states and territories to get them through the COVID pandemic this year and enabled them to be able to deal with the unfortunate increase in demand that we saw during the COVID pandemic. This has supported 450 frontline operations and employed hundreds of new people into this sector to make sure that women and children across the country are receiving the services that they need. We know that the next national plan to end violence against women and their children must be more than words, which is why I was disappointed this morning to hear Senator McAllister claim the government had shown little energy or interest in this issue. That is blatantly untrue. I give you my commitment that this government will work and continue to work in a non-partisan way to make sure that we end all forms of violence against women and their children in this country. I urge you to do the same.
Senator Chandler, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank the Minister for her response. Minister, how will the government ensure accountability under the next national plan?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. The next national plan will be an ambitious blueprint to end family, domestic and sexual violence, and it must be more than words. That is why we're investing $22.4 million over the next 5 years to establish a Domestic Family and Sexual Violence Commission. The Commission will oversee the implementation of the next national plan, with the responsibility for monitoring and reporting on accountability and making sure that we are measuring and evaluating the outcomes that we seek in this space. It will be to support the government in developing and fostering relationships across the whole sector, between governments of all levels, state and territory, local governments, and making sure that we are working with the sector, but most importantly that we are working with victim survivors so that we can understand exactly what they need. It is vital to ensure the next national plan delivers real and tangible outcomes on the ground for women and children in Australia who are the victims of this violence.
Senator Chandler, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, how is the government ensuring the next national plan to end violence against women and their children is inclusive for all victims of family, domestic and sexual violence?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, we have embarked over the last 18 months through the COVID pandemic with a multi-layered consultation approach to ensure all Australians have the opportunity to participate and be involved in ending violence against women and their children, in fact ending violence, gender-based violence across Australia. There was an inquiry conducted in the House of Representatives, the Standing Committee on Social Policy and Legal Affairs, which received over 300 submissions into their inquiry. We have conducted 2 public surveys, workshops and interviews with stakeholders and established the National Plan Advisory Group as well as the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Advisory Group. The National Summit on Women's Safety brought together as a culmination all of these forms of consultation and brought together representatives of over 200 organisations so that they could take part in the discussions to inform the next national plan. Most importantly, victim survivors were invited to participate in this because their voices must be front and centre of the next national plan.
Senator Keneally.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. On Monday, I asked the Minister about a photo posted by LNP MP George Christensen and Victorian Premier Dan Andrews on his Telegram account, inciting violent comments threatening Premier Andrews' life. These posts were drawn to the attention of the AFP. The Minister took my question on notice. I asked again yesterday, but the Minister still did not have an answer. Can he today advise what action Mr Morrison has taken in response to Mr Christensen's online activity?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, I can certainly confirm to the Senate that the Prime Minister has discussed online activity and the need for responsibility in online activity with the member for Dawson. As it is well known, the Prime Minister has indeed in national and public comments urged all Australians to show responsibility in relation to their engagement online, Mr President. As I understand it, the type of comments that Senator Keneally refers to were posted by others in response to the senators, in response to the member for Dawson's posts. As we all know, sadly, in maintaining social media accounts with avenues for people to make a comment, there are times in which people make comments that they should not make. If those comments have been referred to the AFP, then it is rightly a matter for the AFP to conclude the investigations that they are undertaking, if they are doing so in relation to any such comments.
Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
First, Mr President, I seek leave to table the post from the member for Dawson.
Is leave granted?
Thank
Leave
you.
is granted.
On Monday, the Minister said he was unaware that Mr Christensen had posted a video of Catherine King MP, which incited threatening comments directed at Ms King, and that post was drawn to the attention of the AFP. I asked again yesterday, but the Minister still did not have an answer. Can the minister advise that whether Mr Morrison has taken any action in relation to Mr Christensen in relation to these threats against Ms King?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, I would draw the senator's attention to the answer I just gave. That answer covers the posts in question and the discussions that have been had and the actions that are rightly in the domain of the AFP.
Senator Keneally, a second supplementary question.
Again, I seek leave to table documents relating to the issue regarding Ms King.
Is leave
the
granted?
post from the member for Dawson. Thank you.
Leave is granted.
Thank you. Given the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police revealed on Monday he has been investigating various threats against parliamentarians, and yesterday WA Premier Mark McGowan disclosed threats to behead him and his family were recently made, why has it taken this minister 2 days to answer questions on this serious issue?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, it is completely unacceptable and right of condemnation and worthy of condemnation when threats are made against any Australian, including, of course, those of us who serve in public office and public life. Far too many of us have seen such threats, violent action, have had to engage with those who work so hard to help to protect us as they do to help to protect the nation through our different law enforcement agencies. And I place on record my thanks, and I know the thanks of all senators who've had to engage with the AFP or with any other Home Affairs or other agencies in relation to protection on such matters. In relation to the issues that Senator Keneally raises, as you indicated, the AFP may be looking into certain matters there. They're the right authority to do so.
Your time for the answer has expired. Senator Molan.
Thank you, Mr President. And my question is to the Attorney-General, Senator Cash. Can the Attorney-General inform the Senate how the Liberal and Nationals government is protecting the Australian way of life and ensuring Australians remain safe from ever-evolving threats of terrorism?
The Attorney-General, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Molan for his question, and of course I acknowledge his service in helping to keep our country safe. Mr President, the Coalition Government's first priority is to keep our community safe from those who seek to do us harm. Since September 2014, when the national terrorism threat level was raised, 144 people have been charged as a result of 71 counter-terrorism-related operations around Australia. 21 major counter-terrorism disruption operations have been undertaken in response to potential or imminent attack planning in Australia. And sadly, 9 Australians have lost their lives. Mr President, we know our law enforcement and security agencies are among the best in the world, but we have to ensure that they have the powers that they need. That is why, since 2014, our government has now passed 29 tranches of national security legislation. And this legislation, of course, has been crucial in providing our law enforcement and security agencies the framework and powers needed to identify, target and disrupt those who seek to do harm to Australia, Australians and our way of life. However, we now have a significant challenge that has been facing our counter-terrorism efforts in recent years. Currently, there are 18 convicted terrorists who are due for release over the next 5 years and can still pose a very significant risk to the Australian community. But that is why our government has methodically built a world-leading framework to effectively manage those persons over the coming years. We can't eliminate entirely the risk of terrorism more than we can eliminate the risk of any serious crime. However, we can take appropriate action.
Your time has expired. Senator Molan, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. To the Attorney-General again, how does the recent passage of high-risk terrorist offenders legislation build and expand on the framework that is provided to our law enforcement and security agencies to manage high-risk offenders and protect Australians?
Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr President. And as we know from our security and our law enforcement agencies, terrorist offenders are typically highly radicalised and often do not change their extremist views whilst they are in prison. Recent tragic events in New Zealand and the United Kingdom remind us of the real and present threat that these offenders do indeed pose. The high-risk terrorist offenders legislation introduces extended supervision orders as another tool to keep Australians safe from terrorists. The extended supervision orders will ensure offenders are subject to close supervision and specific conditions tailored to the level of risk that they themselves pose. These will complement the current regime of control orders and continuing detention orders that are used to ensure the community is kept safe by managing terrorists after their jail term ends.
Senator Molan, a second supplementary question.
In addition to managing individual offenders, Attorney, what is the government doing in relation to the organisations that plan, finance and carry out terrorist acts?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr President. And the Morrison-Joyce government continues to keep Australians safe from terrorism and from violent extremism. And today we would have seen Minister Andrews announce the intention to list the base and the entirety of Hezbollah as terrorist organisations under the Criminal Code. Listing the base and Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation under the Criminal Code sends a clear message that the Australian government condemns the actions of groups that use terrorism to achieve their political, religious or ideological objectives. The listings will enable the application of terrorist organisation offences to these groups and align Australia with international partners such as the United Kingdom and Canada. By listing the terrorist organisations, it enables penalties of up to 25 years imprisonment, including if you are a member of, training with or providing terrorist support to the organisations.
Expired. Senator Griff.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to Senator McKenzie, representing the Minister for Agriculture. Minister, in the first week of November, state and federal agricultural ministers met and considered the recommendations of the Pet Food Working Group. This meeting came a staggering 4 years after dozens of dogs started dying after consuming a brand of dry kibble, and exactly 3 years after the Senate handed down its report on regulatory approaches to ensure the safety of pet food. As usual, there was no outcome from the November meeting. Apparently, ministers are now going to wait on a cost-benefit analysis of some kind. Minister, why is the federal government and the state and territory counterparts not acting with greater urgency and instead acting like an errant new puppy by chewing up the paperwork, dropping the ball and running away from taking urgent action?
The Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Senator McKenzie.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I do thank Senator Griff for his question and for his ongoing interest in this serious issue. My advice from the Minister for Agriculture is that there does remain a high level of community interest in the safety of pet food following the pet food incidents in 2018 and more recently in Victoria. There was a pet food working group established with agreement of all agriculture ministers, and they welcomed the Senate inquiry into the pet food industry in 2018. That working group has developed a range of regulatory and non-regulatory options for consideration, as you say, by state and territory governments. ABARES has also updated its 2012 report on the economic assessment of policy options to manage pet food safety in Australia. And the report includes options for self-regulation, co-regulation and full government regulation. The reports of the Pet Food Working Group and ABARES were considered by agriculture senior officials on the 16th of September 2021 and again on the 30th of September 2021. It was agreed that a cost-benefit analysis of all the policy options would be undertaken before making recommendations to ministers on which options should be pursued. And, Senator, as you would appreciate, decisions of this nature that do go to state and territories' regulatory frameworks do need to be able to assess how much it will cost, what are going to be the unforeseen circumstances of if we go the full regulatory option, who's going to bear the cost for that, and what are the implications for state and territory ministers as they consider adopting those regulatory frameworks. So, given your usual concern about the efficient use of taxpayer spending,
Minister, the time for your answer has expired. Senator Griff, a supplementary question.
Minister, 4 years is a very long time to get to the point of even considering a cost-benefit analysis, and I'm not sure how a cost-benefit analysis will be accepted by people who've lost many pets over many years. But can you detail what reforms are actually on the table and what changes pet owners can expect to see?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. And, Senator, I do recognise the grief that is caused by losing pets, particularly around this type of issue that could be avoided. And I assure you that the Commonwealth is taking its role in this very, very seriously. But as you would appreciate, working with states and territory ministers can have its challenges in harmonising regulations across the different areas of government. So the other issue that I'm advised has been undertaken is a review of the Australian standard for manufacturing and marketing of pet food. That was also supported by the agricultural senior officials, as well as jurisdictions, industry and other key stakeholders. I think it's important to note that this process has been conducted in a careful and considered manner in consultation with all the relevant stakeholders, and there's not been consensus on the best option for state and territory ministers to pursue.
Your time has expired. Senator Griff, a second supplementary.
Minister, would any of the measures currently undergoing this cost-benefit analysis, in your view, actually prevent future deaths of pets from unsafe food?
Minister.
Well, as you know, Senator Griff, I represent the Minister for Agriculture. I'm not the minister themselves, so I'm acting on advice, but I'm confident that all ministers involved want to see a positive resolution to this. My understanding is the Commonwealth Agriculture Minister has written to state and territory ministers and asked that they consider the outcomes of that review into the Australian standards of manufacturing, that they consider that and that the desire of many for a positive outcome for pets and pet owners when deciding the best way forward. He has also concluded the Pet Food Review Working Group and thanked all the members for their participation. And he anticipates that the reports from that working group and ABARES will be made public by the end of this year. As responsibility for the domestic oversight for pet food sits with the jurisdictions, this will ultimately be a decision for state and territory ministers whether to adopt a mandatory regulatory framework or continue to operate under the current voluntary
Minister, your time has expired. We now go to Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie. Can the Minister outline how the Liberal and National Government's plan is contributing to the economic security of regional and remote Australia by supporting jobs, businesses and investment?
The Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator McDonald for her question. As she knows from her on-ground experience in Queensland, particularly the north, regional Australia is experiencing a once-in-a-generation surge in economic growth. And this is all the while these communities are recovering from the effects of the COVID pandemic, drought and other natural disasters over the recent period. A combination of high commodity prices, strong overseas demand for our agriculture and resources, a good rainfall in most of rural Australia are factors that are contributing to a positive economic outlook, which translates into jobs and a higher standard of living for all Australians. But while this economic recovery is good news for the people of rural and regional Australia, this success didn't just come about by accident. The Liberal and Nationals government has been investing and delivering in thousands of projects on the ground to help lay the groundwork for our farmers, fishers, foresters, miners and small businessmen and women for the great work they do in the country. And we are ensuring our economy continues to grow with low interest rates, low taxes and higher and higher employment. We're also experiencing an unprecedented population shift from our congested capital cities to regional areas that has set a net migration of 45,000 Australians moving to regional towns and cities. and this means stronger, more resilient and more vibrant regional centres. Our government's investment includes a record $110 billion in infrastructure projects in road and rail, and the 1,700-kilometre inland rail to better connect our regional communities and shift product to capital cities, ports and overseas. We've spent $3.5 billion on building dams and pipelines and weirs so that we use our precious water resources more efficiently. And we've put $5 billion back into communities for drought resilience. In my own areas of responsibility too, we as a government have made available $2.5 billion to support those communities impacted
your
by
time
black
has expired. Senator McDonald, a supplementary question.
Can the minister outline how this will support Australia's economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Minister.
We know that much of Australia's economic output is as a result of the hard work, ingenuity and commitment of the men and women who live and work in remote and regional Australia. Our investments in infrastructure, connectivity and resilience support these communities to prosper not only in the short term but for many, many years to come. 8 out of Australia's top 10 exports are produced in regional, rural and remote areas. Ag exports alone have grown to $306 billion a year when we came to power in 2012 to $476 billion in 2019-20. Australia's resources and energy export industry grew from $178 billion when we came to power to $310 billion in 2021. That represents a 74% increase over this period. And sovereign manufacturing, from food manufacturing to defence manufacturing, are also growing at record levels. Our government economic management and regionalisation strategy is making a significant contribution to our economic growth.
Senator McDonald, a second supplementary question.
Can the minister outline any risks to our economic recovery if our regions are not supported to prosper and the impact this would have on the broader Australian economy?
Minister.
Well, unfortunately, Mr President and Senator McDonald, I can identify a risk, and it is the risk of electing Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party, who hand-in-hand with Adam Bandt and his green eco-warriors, who will choose to decimate not only our agriculture and our mining industries, but the ultimate renewable industry, the great Australian forest industry. The timber workers and the timber processing workers right across this country have much to fear from the election of the Labor Party, led by Anthony Albanese, and Larissa Warder, Nick McKim and all their mates with Adam Bandt, the green policies that will be adopted as a result of their coalition government. So when you talk to the millions of people that live out in rural and regional Australia, the greatest risk to the economic recovery to the regions and indeed to the nation is that side of politics that has no respect for the regions or the industries that underpin our economies.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister for Women's Safety, Minister Ruston. The Women's Safety Summit statement was clear. Affordable and accessible short- and long-term housing is fundamental so that women aren't having to choose between violence or homelessness. Commissions may be useful, but how many additional houses or crisis accommodation places will the Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner announced overnight create? Where is the funding to put a roof over people's heads and ensure that victim survivors have somewhere safe to go when they escape? And does the government support national tenancy protections for victim survivors?
The Minister for Women's Safety, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Waters for her question and for her ongoing interest in this really, really vital area of Australian policy. The coalition government, of which I am the Minister for Women's Safety, is absolutely committed to put in place a range of measures to make sure we support women who are making that extraordinarily brave decision to leave a violent relationship. Part of that package obviously has to make sure that there is a safe place for them to go. So far, in both the 2021-22 budget, in the 4th Action Plan, we have actually provided support to the states and territories, particularly in rural and regional Australia, a program called Safe Places, which has provided accommodation for 6,500 women and children escaping violence every year so that they can have a safe place to go. In addition to that, we are also working with the states and territories around a program called Keeping Women Safe in Their Home, because we need to change the dial here. Instead of making the victim survivors the ones that suffer the pain, we need to make sure that the perpetrators are held to account. And the best way to hold a perpetrator to account, when it's safe to do so, is make him leave the home so that she and the children can stay there, so they can stay with the support mechanisms of their family, their friends and their school, and they don't have to leave with nothing. But only when it's safe to do so. We also announced as part of the 21-22 budget the Escaping Violence Payment. It's a 2-year program that we're trialling to make sure that we get it right, but that $164 million plus program provides $5,000 to women who are leaving a violent relationship so that they can have their necessities to be able to set up a safe new home for themselves and, in the case of when they have children, their children. And one of the things that we have heard very, very clearly is the fact that putting down a bond on a new place to be able to rent sometimes is the most important thing that women are requiring that assistance for. We will continue to work with you, Senator Waters, and everybody else to end violence against women and their children.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Waters, a supplementary question.
Thanks, President. The second edition of Our Watchers Toolkit, Change the Story, was released today. It confirms the need to address the drivers of violence against women. Will the government fund comprehensive, expert-led, respectful relationships programs from early childhood education onwards to dismantle the rape culture and gender stereotyping at the heart of gendered violence?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, Senator Waters, one of the absolutely fundamental things that we have to do as part of the next national plan is not to just provide support for response, albeit a very important component of what we do in addressing gender-based violence, but we have to stop it before it starts. That's absolutely prevention is the #1 thing that we must do, because if we genuinely are going to end violence against women and their children, we actually have to stop it from happening in the first place. So it's extremely important that we put in place a number of programs. And to your point in relation to consent and respectful relationships, they are the absolute fundamental underlier on making sure that we have a country that is free from violence. Because, as we all know, that whilst all disrespectful behaviour does not end up in violence, we can be absolutely assured that every single circumstance of domestic, family and sexual violence starts with a disrespectful action. We must address that in the next plan.
Senator Waters, a second supplementary question.
Thanks, President. The women's safety sector have been calling for an investment of $12 billion over 12 years as part of the new national plan to meet existing demand as well as projected service demands. The government's commitments to date and overnight fall well short of that. Can the minister confirm whether the government ever intends to lift its contribution so that family, domestic and sexual violence services are not forced to turn people away when they seek help?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, I think that this government's record stands very strongly in that in May this year, the 2021-22 budget made a down payment on the next national plan of $1.1 billion, the largest ever investment in women's safety that this country has ever seen. And that is running in parallel to the final stages and the expenditure of the 4th Action Plan, as well as ongoing measures, for instance 1800RESPECT, which is an ongoing measure that's funded into the future. So I think this government has shown a very strong commitment to making sure that the resources are available, not just, as you talk about, in terms of responding to the horrible situation in relation to domestic violence, but making sure that we deal with prevention, early intervention and also the recovery, so that we make sure that we're providing the resources on the whole journey that we see through domestic violence. Because I'd like to think, Senator Waters, that you and I were on a unity ticket to end violence against women and their children.
Minister, your time has expired. I would remind senators on my left that interjections are always disorderly. Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health. Earlier this month, the community of Woodner in South Australia were advised by their local doctor, Dr Scott Lewis, that he was leaving, no longer able to tolerate working in a system, and I quote, with so little respect for its frontline medical and nursing staff. He'll be relocating to Adelaide at the end of the year. What is the government doing to remedy his concerns about the lack of respect and the lack of support? What is the government doing to ensure continuity of service in Woodner after Dr Lewis leaves? What will the cost of that continuity of service be to the government, and what is the government doing to replace Dr Lewis?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thanks, Senator, for the question and of some notice of the topic of the question, given its very local specificity, Mr President. Mr President, I can understand the concern of the residents of Woodner losing their local GP. My understanding, having had a conversation with the very, very good member for Grey, Mr Ramsey, this afternoon, that the doctor, Dr Lewis, actually only came for a short period of time to Woodner and stayed for 15 years. He's given great service to that local community, and I'm sure that the community are very sad to leave him, Mr President. And the issues in relation to attracting doctors to regional areas is a difficult one. It's many-faceted, and I have to say I'm really quite proud of the work that this government's done in support of attracting doctors into regional areas. In the 18-19 budget, we put $550 million into the Stronger Rural Health Strategy and followed that up in last year's budget with another $123 million supporting the implementation of that strategy, Mr President. And in that particular area, I'm aware that Mr Ramsey's been very active in working with his colleagues, Minister Hunt and Minister Gillespie, to work on local solutions, and I'm advised, Mr President, that Minister Gillespie has also had a number of conversations, direct conversations with the South Australian Minister for Health, Minister Wade, to see what the two governments can do together in support of providing GP services in that local area. Mr President, I'm also aware that Minister Hunt, following a conversation, provided $300,000 to support a report that's being done by the Northern Air Health Alliance, which will be handed to Minister Hunt very soon.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Patrick, a supplementary question.
Sounds like a lot of talk and not a lot of action at this point. Kimber has had a doctor for only 2 of the last 6 years. Currently, they are being serviced by locums when those locums are available. Mayor Dean Johnson tells me that they have no doctor in Kimber this week, a week where South Australia is opening up its borders to COVID. What is the government doing to remedy this situation in Kimber?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Can I say I do reject the allegation made at the outset of that question. I have to say Mr Ramsey has been very actively working with his ministerial colleagues and ministerial colleagues working again closely with the South Australian government. As I was just saying towards the end of my answer, Mr Ramsey secured $300,000 for the Northern Air Health Alliance to undertake a piece of work to see what would be the most effective things in attracting and retaining doctors, specifically in the Kimber region, Mr President. And so he's actually out there doing the job and working hard for his constituents. And I acknowledge, Senator Patrick, your concern for the community as well. This is an important issue, but it is complex. And so we are working with that community, providing them with resources to help come to solutions and facilitate the attraction of doctors into those particular communities, because we understand it's important.
Your time has expired. Senator Patrick, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. Woodner and Kimber, 100 kilometres apart in the centre of the Eyre Peninsula, soon won't have a doctor in sight. Does the minister accept that there is a real potential for death to occur from an incident or accident and the direct inability to respond with a qualified doctor in short time? Does the government accept that it will be responsible for deaths in these circumstances?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Senator, I think it's really unfortunate that you try and portray any tragic incident that might occur in a local community in those circumstances. And there are other provisions that the government in place, including specific arrangements with the Royal Flying Doctor Service, for example, that provide support into regional areas. But as I've said in my 2 initial answers, there is direct action and activity being undertaken by the local member with local communities, with his ministerial colleagues and the state government in efforts to attract doctors to the region, Mr President. Dr Lewis has not left yet, but has, I think, quite responsibly given the community some notice that he is going to go. It gives the community, the government, state, federal and local, the opportunity to work together to see what they can do to attract additional services to the region in a very complex climate.
Has expired. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Why did Mr Morrison tell the March for Justice protesters that they were lucky not to be met with bullets, but when protesters marched across Victoria, threatening to hang the Premier, including one with gallows, he spoke about how he understood their frustrations?
He did say that.
The Minister representing the Prime Minister. Order. Order. Minister, just resume your seat. We'll wait till the chamber is silent. The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, Mr President, it is a problem in this place in relation to the way in which questions are put and conduct occurs when statements are taken significantly out of context. I do reject the premise of this question, Mr President, and in doing so, I note very much that the Prime Minister, at the time, if my memory is correct, was noting indeed in countries like Australia, which indeed is what makes the right of all to protest in this country a safer one and should be a safe one, unlike in so many other parts of the world, so tragically. But that, Mr President, shows, in terms of the context of this question, the extent to which those opposite seek to take the low road in politics, while on this side, Mr President, I note, Mr President, the appalling absence of questions on policy issues from those opposite, the appalling absence of questions related to policy on that side. We are proud as a government. To be leading a country that has achieved some of the lowest fatality rates from COVID-19, some of the highest vaccination rates in relation to COVID-19 and some of the strongest economic outcomes in managing through this disaster and challenge. We're proud as a government, Mr President, to have seen some 700,000 jobs come back from the worst stages of the COVID-19 economic hit, to see record numbers of apprenticeship commencements occurring as a result of our policies. These are the types of policies those opposite could choose to ask about, but don't ask about, because for them, they choose to make it personal, and they choose to take the low road.
Your time has expired. Senator Walsh, Senator Walsh, please resume your seat. Senator Wong, I'm attempting to give one of the opposition's members the call, and you are interjecting across the chamber. Senator Walsh, a supplementary question.
On the weekend, the protesters whose frustrations Mr Morrison said he understood heard from one speaker, and I quote, "Are we willing to go to the absolute end? Is it fair to say that we will go to any length necessary to rid our parliament of those traitorous politicians?" Are these the frustrations Mr Morrison says he understands?
Of course they are.
Sorry, just before I call you, Minister, interjections are always disorderly. I was trying to listen. I was attempting to listen to the content of the question, which presumably you want me to do, Senator Wong. Minister, you have the call.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, the comments that were quoted clearly deserve condemnation. They have been condemned, such comments, by the Prime Minister, by me, by many others, many times, continuously. during the course of events since those protests occurred, Mr. President. And again, it's an example of those opposite in terms of the type of character destruction they're trying to undertake, in terms of the personalisation of politics they're trying to undertake, all to, of course, cover up for the policy vacuum that they have. Mr. President, those opposite should reflect on the fact that they are continuing to try to seek to exacerbate and to highlight the types of problems and divisions that do not help us as a country in terms of sensibly dealing with the challenges we face. And as a country, we have overwhelmingly through COVID-19 dealt with issues sensibly and successfully as a nation.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Walsh, a second supplementary question.
The same speaker said at the protest, and I quote, "There is no doubt in my mind that we are winning." Would protesters who are willing to go to any length necessary still think they were winning if they hadn't been backed by the Prime Minister of Australia?
Order. Minister.
Well, Mr. President, I again reject the premise of that question. The Prime Minister was very clear in relation to his condemnation of violence, very clear in relation to the fact that it has no place in any protest, in any other such activity, nor those seeking to provoke or promote acts of violence in any way. Now, for those opposite who want to keep repeating and repeating and repeating a falsehood and an assertion, that is a matter for them to explain why it is that rather than wanting to come into this place and debate the issues for Australians around their jobs, their lives, the many challenges that people face, which we pleasingly have seen them come through COVID-19 in such a successful way, as I say, some of the lowest fatality rates around the world in this country, some of the strongest economic outcomes, some of the highest vaccination rates. This is a testament to Australia's success.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Bragg.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Superannuation, Financial Services and Digital Economy, Senator Hume. Can the Minister outline to the Senate how the government's Director ID program is making it easier for small business to engage with government as we reopen the economy?
The Minister for Superannuation, Senator Hume.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I thank Senator Bragg for his question. Mr. President, businesses large and small are at their most productive and competitive when they spend less time on paperwork and more time focused on what they do best. That's why the Morrison government's Modernising Businesses Registered program will deliver a single entry point to streamline how businesses register, view and maintain information with the government. This new, fast and easy-to-use platform, announced as part of the Morrison government's digital business plan, will bring together more than 30 ASIC registers and the Australian Business Register onto a new, modern system at the ATO. A major component of this program is the establishment of Director IDs. As of the 1st of November this year, Australia's 2.7 million company directors can now quickly and easily apply for their new Director ID online, using the Australian Business Registry Services website. This unique 15-digit identifier only takes minutes to apply for, but it will stay with a director for life, even as directors move between different roles, different businesses and even different countries. In a world of increasing identity theft and cybersecurity threats, Director ID offers far greater identity security than is currently available. More importantly, Mr. President, Director ID will help to level the playing field for honest businesses. They will present the use of fictitious directors, help regulators trace directors' relationships with companies over many years and over time, and better identify director involvement in unlawful activities, such as illegal Phoenix activity. To apply for a Director ID, directors can very simply log on to the Australian Business Register service online using the MyGov ID app. It's free to apply and available to directors within Australia and overseas. Applications can be made by phone, they can be made by paper and for those who need it, but the online application form takes only minutes to complete and their Director ID is issued instantly.
Senator Bragg, a supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Order.
I can't hear with the masks on. It's hard to hear the interjections.
Well, interjections are always disorderly,
Well,
Senator
there you
Bragg.
go.
So
See, that's
let's silence on my left, Senator Bragg.
What a tremendous time.
Order.
Can't hear you either. Sorry.
Order, Senator.
Very good.
O'Neill.
That's a good zinger. Well done.
Senator O'Neill.
I can't hear that either. Sorry.
Senator Bragg.
Send us an email, Deb.
I think isn't this your time?
Senator Bragg.
Thank you very much.
Senator Keneally.
I've got enough time to read the question, so it'll be okay. Don't worry. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Can the minister detail to the Senate the uptake of director IDs to date?
Minister.
Thank you again, Senator Bragg. Mr. President, since the 1st of November this year, in just the first 2 weeks of the rollout, we've seen more than 70,000 director IDs issued. 96% of director ID applications have been digital. And the Australian Business Registry Services website has had over 500,000 unique page views since the beginning of November alone. Mr. President, these are extraordinary figures, especially given the rollout is still in its public beta phase, and they're a testament to industry and the community's support for this particularly important program. And with 96% of applications made digitally and online, it highlights businesses' support for this government's efforts to improve the efficiency of registry service transactions in online settings. Indeed, while the opposition will talk about illegal Phoenix activity, only the coalition government will actually address it.
Senator Bragg, a second supplementary question.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. Can the minister advise the Senate which stakeholders have said what about the measure and how it will help secure the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Bragg. Mr. President, the Australian business community has wholeheartedly supported and embraced the Director ID program as part of the Morrison government's commitment to cut red tape for business. The Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry said that the consolidation of business registers will simplify businesses' interactions with government and reduce duplication. Businesses need only tell government once. Similarly, the Australian Institute of Company Directors recognised the program's value as a flexible and technology-neutral modern business registry regime and its potential to stop criminal behaviour and illegal Phoenix activity. Director ID is just one of the many business-focused solutions that the Morrison government is implementing to make doing business easier, fairer, faster and safer. And it's part of Australia's commitment to being a leading digital economy and society by 2030.
Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I rise to ask a question of the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. On what date did Mr Morrison first become aware of Mr Christensen's posts, which incited threats of violence against Premier Andrews and Catherine King?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. President, a few things in relation to this question. I'm not aware of precise dates in relation to those posts. As I said earlier in this week, I certainly was only aware of them when Senator Keneally asked. The next point I'd make, Mr. President, is that I think it is important that we are clear in relation to these matters. Apparently, and I've not seen the comments that Senator Keneally has been asking about during the week, but these are comments that have been made on Mr Christensen's posts, not of course the posts themselves in relation to acts of violence. Mr. President, I also wish, while I'm on my feet, to correct the record in relation to the answer I gave Senator Keneally earlier today. I understand, as I indicated at the time, of course, the Prime Minister has publicly urged all Australians to show responsibility in relation to social media platforms and the like, in relation to conversations with the member for Dawson about responsibility on social media platforms and the like. Those conversations have been had by the Leader of the National Party, the Deputy Prime Minister.
The minister has completed his answer. Do you have a supplementary question, Senator O'Neill?
I would hope that the minister might take the last question on notice, seeing as he was unable to provide an answer to a very specific question. My next question, Deputy President, is another date. On what date did Mr Morrison discuss these posts with Mr Christensen, and was that via telephone or face-to-face?
Minister.
Well, Mr President, I refer to the correction on the record I just gave to Senator O'Neill. If there's any information around dates of knowledge or the like, I'll seek to bring that to the House.
Senator O'Neill, a second supplementary question.
I'm sorry, Mr President, I actually couldn't hear Senator Birmingham's response. I was listening. I simply couldn't hear his response.
I don't want to put words into the minister's mouth, but I believe he took it on notice if he could get you further information. Well, that was because there were interjections. So, Senator O'Neill, a second supplementary question.
So, thank you. I do have a further supplementary question, and will Mr Morrison ask Mr Christensen to remove his incendiary posts, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, as members of Parliament, we are all responsible for our own actions and for those actions in terms of the way in which we engage. Mr President, in relation to the member for Dawson, it is well known that the member for Dawson is a vocal participant in public debate. I again, Mr President, do draw the distinction between the comments that Senator Keneally alleges have been posted, and of course on, I'm sure, nearly all of our different social media platforms we have had cause at times to delete comments that have been made that are completely inappropriate and that deserve condemnation. And I would urge all of us, including the member for Dawson, to be so vigilant in doing so. Notice.
Yeah.